Hey everyone, as promised, we are live from the Hudson Valley with Loki seated on my lap, which he likes to do when I am broadcasting. And there's a bunch of things I want to do in this podcast, outspoken. The first one is that I'd like to read you my latest Substack essay, which is called Adventures with the Common Cold. And I would like to read it to you because many of you are suffering from what has been branded cold A or, flu A, and are given very little hope or help from big pharma or big medicine. And there is hope and help, and I'm going to talk to you about it in our first two segments or so. Then I'm going to go to a couple of segments on news events, specifically President Trump at Davos. And lastly, I'm going to talk about civil war arriving right on schedule, as I've been predicting for a couple of years now, in Minnesota. So before I jump in, I just want to say, the news today, Saturday, January 24th, is that a mega storm of biblical apocalyptic proportions is about to hit much of the United States, especially the eastern seaboard where I'm located right now. And we've never seen snow like this before, and it's the worst in 41 years. And beware, beware, beware. The language that I've noticed, the language that weather, especially official weather channels, use these days is very tendentious, like bitter cold instead of extreme cold, or life-threatening flooding instead of severe flooding or 5 inches of flooding, right? And this is no accident. There's a very concerted effort, just as we've been encouraged to be terrified of germs and viruses that our bodies, used to, for the most part, be able to withstand, bacteria. We're also being encouraged to be terrified of weather, basically anything in the IRL world, instead of what's mediated through our phones, is being rebranded as terrifying. And so it really helps at times like this, as I often say, to be a student of 400 years of English and American literature, because who remembers reading Little House on the Prairie? Okay, who remembers reading Little House in the Big Woods? Who remembers reading all of those Little House books? I mean, I'm not even talking about the TV series that came later. If you read the actual Laura Ingalls Wilder series as a child or teenager, you would know that Americans used to deal with literally feet of snow every winter. Feet of snow. Remember when Laura Ingalls Wilder's dad couldn't leave the house to feed the cattle without stringing a clothesline because the blizzard was so blinding, and he didn't want to wander off and get lost, not be able to see the house and come back because the snow was so intense. Remember when there were drifts of snow kind of up to the windows? And you can see this in old photographs of New York. Remember, in New York City, people used to ice skate on the rink in Central Park, and there were snow drifts like 3 and 4 feet high on either side of the sidewalks. So we've had severe weather before. It's called winter, as my contractor said this morning. It's called winter. And so the idea that we would be hysterical over what looks like it'll be between less than a foot and 2 feet of snow is really quite extraordinary. All that being said, I'm attuned to the, it's super scary language, but I'm also attuned to the fact that people really are scared, because in the cities and in the suburbs, many people are anticipating, and this may well happen because I think that chaos is on the agenda, right? Whether it's organic or hyped or a mixture, chaos is on the agenda. So there may be power outages, right? It's not, we're on a fragile rural grid. It's not unusual for our power to collapse, with the least extreme thunderstorm, right? But people who are dependent on supermarkets and the electrical grid are really terrified and panicking, or at least I should say there's media and social media, um, encouraging terror and panic. Let's put it that way. Mostly encouraging a sense of vulnerability and helplessness. And the reason this is so fascinating to me is that, I'm here in our little farmhouse in the middle of the Hudson Valley. It's very, very rural, as you can see. You know this backdrop quite well because you've seen it often, but there's just nothing but kind of woods in that direction. I don't know if you can see so clearly, but it's a snowy mountain. It's woods out there, and I'm not worried. We're not worried. And some of the reasons we're not worried is that we went into a deep prepper phase at the beginning of the pandemic, and Brian and I were both very well aware that the people running the grid and running the supermarkets and the food supply and so on were not necessarily our friends, or could be held hostage to people who were not necessarily our friends, like China. Interrupting supplies, as you recall, really did happen during the pandemic. So we became preppers. We're not the best preppers in the world. We're not the most talented preppers. We're not the most thorough preppers. But it doesn't take that much to be okay off the grid. So I'm just going to show you. I took the glass globe off of it so you can see it more clearly. This is an oil lamp, guys. This technology has been in use since at least the Roman times. Certainly the Bible talks, in the New Testament, when they talk about the bridesmaids always being prepared with their oil lamps, it was a version of this, just a wick and some lamp oil in a container. In the time of the New Testament, they were probably clay. Same with the Old Testament. They talk about lamps. They're recovered from archaeological digs, and they are clay, sort of shaped like that, kind of shaped like Aladdin's lamp, right? That's an oil lamp. Aladdin's lamp is an oil lamp. And in the 19th century, probably 18th century, glass began to be used, which makes it easier to see when the wick is running low. So it's the simplest technology in the world. You just roll this up, when you need more wick, and it burns. And it burns by dipping into the oil at the base of the wick. It's that simple. Jane Austen, when she talks about lighting the lamps, she was talking about oil lamps, or she was talking about tallow or beeswax candles, which are another issue. The point is, this technology has been working for millennia. You can use many different kinds of oil. This is lamp oil that you can order from Amazon, but people have been sharing online also emergency lamps made of Crisco, which is a solidified fat, which is basically the same idea. You put a wick in a jar, a mason jar, and you fill it with Crisco, and it burns, and you've got light. The point is, nothing. The grid can go out all it wants. I can light this lamp. And if you look up how to make a Crisco survival lamp, you can light your Crisco lamp if you've got some Crisco. So we're not as helpless as we are told that we are. The other thing you can see behind me is a wood stove. I had that wood stove for probably since 2001, when I first bought this house in the wake of 9/11, because I was scared of not having a place outside Manhattan, because I experienced how it's an island connected to the rest of the world with bridges and tunnels that can easily be cut off. It's a very vulnerable territory, Manhattan. So this wood stove has kept us warm winter after winter after winter after winter. And what's behind me? Trees. There are trees behind me, which is a sustainable source of heat and energy. And so you can go cut down trees and put them in your wood stove. Not all the trees behind me are equally useful for wood burning. Some are less desirable than others. But you can also just go out and, before the storm hits, and load up, as I've done, on some wood and feed the wood stove. I'm gonna show you excuse me, Loki. I'm going to show you what this is. Here is here is wood, okay, and here are matches, and they're good long reach matches, so you can get into that wood stove very easily. And here is kindling. So I know this is like Prepper 101, but I feel like I need to do this video because it can be very intimidating. You don't know where to start. All those prepper sites seem so kind of complicated, and they have skills you will never master. Living in Brooklyn, there is a worldwide rush for gold right now and precious metals. China is buying gold. There are rumors that the Federal Reserve will be using gold to pay off federal debt, or the federal government will be using gold to pay off federal debt. Famous investors are buying gold. And there's a movement away from the dollar worldwide. And you can see that there are warning signs in the economy that appeared before the Great Depression in 2008 that are flashing red right now. So in all this instability, it is a very good idea to protect your savings, to protect your IRA by diversifying into precious metals, especially gold. There are a lot of gold companies out there. Not all of them are kosher. Not all of them are responsible businesses. American Alternative Assets really is. And we're very, very proud to have them as a sponsor. We're very picky about our sponsors, and we only accept sponsors who have products that we either use or invest in ourselves. So I really encourage you to go to cloutgold.com, cloutgold.com, and get a free report explaining to you what the risks are of not diversifying into gold and silver. And I just want to know that when Brian and I started talking about investing in gold 5 years ago, when it first became clear that you could do that easily, if we'd put in $1,000 then, it would be 5,000 now. If we'd put in 10,000 then, it would be 50,000 now, and so on. So obviously you can't predict everything about the future, but gold there's a limited amount of it on the planet. And in a time when you can have your assets switched off, if they're digital, like the truckers in Canada had their bank account switched off. People in Spain are having their bank account switched off. All of China is now on a social credit system. Your assets can be switched off. And Europe is pushing for central bank digital currency. Now is the time to diversify into gold. But this is kindling, and you can start a fire with that. Some paper bags. We've got paper bags there. We've got old newspapers and branches. It's very doable. And so that if, God forbid, the power goes out during this mega storm, we're going to be warm and we're going to have light. There's also candles and a battery powered flashlight. Supermarkets are seeing big runs. And one of the things that is annoying people online is that there are grants, I gather, for some immigrants who are not even necessarily legal to open convenience stores and start businesses in the hospitality industry. Stay with me, Loki. I can't be running after you. We're on a live podcast. So and you can see this in our neighborhood in Brooklyn. A lot of people with convenience stores or bodegas have been clearing out the supermarkets, buying necessities, gallons of milk, gallons of toilet paper. You remember the run on toilet paper from the beginning of the pandemic. Buying, meat, buying cereal, the things that you need, eggs, perishables. So we crazy preppers have a garage and pantries, and they're not that, it's our kitchen's kind of unsightly in a way because we have so many canned goods and so many dried herbs and dried dandelion, from my dandelion harvest, and dried beans and cans of tuna. And bags of rice. The point is, we could be cut off from civilization for months, and we will have enough to eat. We'll have enough to eat because we prepped. Okay. So I'm not worried. And I guess what really interests me as a cultural critic is that preppers are mocked, as you recall. They're considered really lowbrow. Um, Even before there were Trumpers, they were kind of considered Trumpers, kind of rednecks. Oh, preppers, by sophisticated people in cities. Well, it turns out the preppers were right, and it turns out that our great grandparents weathered weather like this and far, far worse, um, with I'm not going to say no problem, because sometimes it got very dire, but certainly with resilience and know-how. And for the most part, 2 feet of snow, no big deal. They dealt with it. The other thing I will say that they had that we don't have so often is an intact community. And one thing you really, really learn living in the country, living in the woods, is that you need your neighbors. And the beautiful thing about needing your neighbors, for things like, oh my God, my generator died. I can't get my car out of, my car's snowed in. Please help me dig it out, or whatever you may run into, right? The thing about needing your neighbors is it's very beautiful, because there is a built-in limit to how badly you want to have an argument with your neighbors. And I mean that in a very profound way. Here on this little rural road, we have people with every political point of view, probably from the greenest Green Party to the most lefty liberals to, hard right, you know, extremists. I mean, extremists on both sides. And it really doesn't matter. We don't get into political arguments. We don't get into religious arguments. Maybe we've got, Episcopalians, Catholics, Jews, Sikhs, I don't know. Everyone is something. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about our differences that are ideological or theoretical. We talk about, oh, did someone get upset that the chickens are overrunning the road, or is there an argument about whether or not someone can run a motor repair shop out of their garage? But those are very practical arguments. We don't get into arguments that are theoretical, as I said, because we can't afford to, right? We don't want to. We want to be a healthy, intact community, because we know any of us possibly need the others, if times get tough, just physically need the others. So I think that's very beautiful. And I encourage you, if you are living in a suburb or if you are living in a city and you don't have a pantry full of dried beans, rice, canned goods, maybe some dehydrated eggs for protein, dehydrated milk, the basics, go ahead and get it, while you can. It'll make you feel so much more confident. And if you can, get that, I really urge you to get a wood stove if you possibly can. They're pretty affordable. I think you can get, what's affordable when half the country's living paycheck to paycheck or on credit card debt, but as an investment in your future, I think you can get a wood stove these days, a very basic one, for about $600 or $700. And I think it's just well worth it. If you're anywhere you're allowed to burn wood, you won't worry. Get these oil lamps. Again, you can get them on Amazon. I love Tractor Supply. I love Tractor Supply. Tractor Supply is just a dream chain. If you're not familiar with it because you're too fancy, go get familiar with it. It's so much fun. They've got everything. They sell chicks in the springtime, like live chicks, but they've got feed, they've got, how to can books, and they've I'm sure got oil lamps and candles for power outages. Get a generator if you can, right? We've actually got a solar powered generator. I don't know how well that'll do in deep winter, but we've got it. And don't be scared, because these people are not done with us, right? They tried to kill us all off during the pandemic, or disable us or sterilize us. You know how I feel about this, with the mRNA injections. And God, I think, intervened. Many people died. Many people were injured or disabled or sterilized, but they didn't kill us off. Humanity survived. They're not done. They're just looking for the next way to control us, scare us, lock us in our homes. And switching off the grid and leaving us helpless, so that we'll accept any intervention from the government or from NGOs, in exchange for heat and light and food, that is a fantastic way to control a population. I mean, you can look at refugee populations, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But, the people who want to exploit the helplessness of refugees do so by making sure they are always refugees and they can never be self-sufficient. And they are always dependent on those NGOs, those handouts from overseas, or the leaders themselves who, can switch off the lights when they want to switch off the lights. And don't think it can't happen. I actually just read a book, really wonderful book, In the Garden of Beasts by historian Erik Larson. He's the guy who wrote The Devil in the White City. It's about Berlin, just at the very beginning of the National Socialist rise to power, 1931, 32, 33. And it's about the family of the American ambassador who was in Berlin representing the US and, keeping a journal of what was happening. And what is very clear is that even before 1933, which was the formal solidification of all law, the enabling acts, right? Sort of all law, all power into the person of Adolf Hitler, the National Socialists started to control populations by switching off their access to the economy, switching off their access to professions, switching off their access to education and to books, and to housing, right? And they did it very, very, medical care. They did it very systematically. So again, that was before they were formally in power, before they were an actual authoritarian government. While it was still a democracy, they did that. I can't stress this enough. It means that, they could do it again tomorrow in the United States. They're doing it, I think, in Britain in various ways, in Belgium in various ways, in France, by through the judicial system, by punishing people who speak up, who criticize, for instance, mass immigration, two-tier justice systems, violence against women escalating with the immigration of people who come from cultures that are very violent toward women as part of the culture. That's how they're doing it, but they're also, you saw in the pandemic, they can switch off overnight. In Britain, the government switched off your right to sit in your garden with another person or to go exercise at will or to go to a pub. So don't let that happen again. Be as self-sufficient as you can possibly be and stay safe and warm during the foot or two of snow. I don't mean to mock it, right? I hope that I hope you won't hear from me like buried alive in a snowdrift, and that's how I passed away after this storm. I'm not trying to kind of court fate. I'm just trying to be balanced, because look at the last 25 years. Hysteria, and especially media-generated hysteria, is how they've tried to control us. Hysteria and making us feel helpless and dependent on them for expertise and for the basics of life, survival. All right, we're not going to let it happen. All right, that was my little rant. I'm going to now read to you from my Substack, and it's called Adventures with the Common Cold. Here we go. The subtitle is Humanity's Adversaries, Common Colds and Flu Have Many Potent Traditional Treatments You'd Never Know. Is Big Pharma trying to kill us all again? Let me know if you can all hear me and see me. It looks like I'm getting thumbs up. There are comments. So yes, you can hear me and see me. Perfect. Let's go to the text. I felt great when I left the magical snowy valley where I had been on a Buddhist-scented retreat over the new year. I still felt great in the truck ride home with a young friend who had kindly picked me up at the retreat center. I still can't drive, I'm still limping, and drove me home over icy rivers and bridges sparkling with frost. The young man is bright, hardworking, healthy, ethical, and handsome. but he has no special lady in his life right now. He spent an hour and a half on the road explaining that there were no young women in our rural area to date because they were all extremely liberal, he said, and thus, sooner or later, he said, not bitterly but meditatively, they would reveal themselves to be fairly deranged. I had heard versions of this complaint from many lovely, hardworking, and personable young men. Once again, I felt sad for humanity, and especially for the young, and I promised to keep my eyes open for him for what my Whittier friends call inventory. By the time I got out of his truck, I had a bit of a sniffle. By nightfall, a raging winter cold had hit me, landing with the force of an anvil dropped on my head, as in old cartoons. Brian, my husband, was with his son in Massachusetts, so I had the odd, interesting, and strangely immersive experience of becoming suddenly very ill while alone in a house with no car, as deep snow piled up all around me and as brazen deer stepped delicately across the fields and stared right into the windows. I had plenty of people who could help me if needed, but my head cold had hit me so hard and so fast and so uncompromisingly that I didn't want to be around anyone at all. All I wanted to do was to lie in bed, curled up in a fetal position, and from time to time to emerge to make tea, to sit bundled in a blanket in an easy chair, and to become aware, with that Buddhist level of refined attention still lingering from the retreat, of how very, very miserable I felt. That head cold was weird, I tell you. Many people who suffered with flu A described it as feeling unnatural or artificial, and that was how I felt about it too. Some of us were mocked by trolls online for this description, but I argue that human survival has depended for millennia on being able to notice something aberrant in the environment, and that we humans are good at distinguishing the natural from the artificial, especially when it comes to something inside our own bodies. At about midnight, the first night I was home, I woke up from a deep sleep and realized that I was sustaining a pounding headache that made every vein on my skull feel like a little river of throbbing molten lead. It was one of the worst headaches I have ever experienced. Nothing eased it, not water, not tea, not more sleep. I lay for hours in darkness, just living through the relentless cranial pounding and trying to tell myself that someday this too must pass. By morning, the headache had eased, but another weird symptom presented itself. Abundant sniffles, but like nothing again I have ever experienced. I don't want to gross you out, but it was bizarre. It was as if a tap had been switched on behind my sinuses. No amount of nose blowing eased the situation. This unpleasant symptom lasted for a gruesome 7 hours or so. But the odd thing was how sequentially these different symptoms presented themselves. It was like a time release illness. By the way, a lot of people who read this have said the same thing, that when they had flu A, they felt like it was time release phases of the illness unfolding. Now the headache, 12 hours. Now the congestion, 7 hours or so. Then that passed like the end of an act in a play. Next, the fatigue. I kept falling asleep, but the sleep was not restorative. Brian came home and looked after me. I recall lying still in our bedroom and slipping in and out of various dreams. I was aware of him bringing a carafe of water to put beside the bed and of him trying to get me to eat. I had no interest in any of it. When I was alert enough to reflect on my situation, I began to get a bit worried. This feeling of maybe just let go had happened to me only twice before in my life. The one time I had had COVID, and the one time I was in the hospital, as I've described to you in the past, with sepsis, when a life-saving surgery was being continually postponed. I recall staring at the two blue botanical prints that hang symmetrically on either side of the windows of our bedroom. I reflected that my bohemian mother often gently teases me for liking these bourgeois floral prints, and I gazed through the window panes at the snowy mountain range that overshadows our little farmhouse. I lay still in flannel pajamas, vanity be damned, thinking something like, well, that is nice, and the world is pretty, but maybe enough is enough. I was aware that I had started to wheeze. Something that felt like a factory devoted to the production of phlegm had dangerously left my sinuses and had decamped to establish itself in my chest. I listened to a regular whistling sound emerging every time I exhaled from a couple of locations in my lungs. I thought without alarm. I distantly recognized that this was a problematic symptom and that the cold could mutate into bronchitis or pneumonia, and that bronchitis and pneumonia could be deadly. Moms, being the good witches that they are, my mother happened to call at that very moment. We always FaceTime, and I'm always overjoyed to see her green-rimmed glasses and her lovely face, its freckles and its golden complexion, and her shock of bright red hair. A painting of a naiad, her hand held open, watery symbols around her, is always floating behind my mom's head when I speak to her on FaceTime. My mother looked at me, and her expression changed. She said something like, "Call a doctor." "I don't want to go to a hospital, Mom," I reminded her. "I almost died last time." "Call a doctor you trust," she said. She gave alchemical direction as real moms do, using the one phrase that she knew would get through to me. She said, "Call Dr. Ely." Dr. Henry Ely, the healer who had saved my life when I had nearly died in the hospital. She repeated sternly, "Call Dr. Ely." Women in my family repeat things when they're trying to save someone. There is something about your mother's face and about her voice when she is really worried about you. Moms, good moms at least, are our mirrors and our better selves, and they act on us like the proverbial shake of the shoulders when we have lost ourselves and when we can no longer think straight about our own self-preservation. When I understood that my mother was worried, I somehow snapped out of my torpor. I didn't call Dr. Ely right away. It was very late at night, but I realized from my mother's anxiety that bed rest alone was not going to heal me. I needed an intervention. So I dragged myself down to the kitchen and began to do what I knew I needed to do to heal myself. By now, my familiarity with herbs made what happened next almost automatic. First, I took our Grosh Aberdeen tea infuser. This is not a sponsor, by the way. None of these people are sponsors. None of these products are sponsored. There are no conflicts. Proudly Canadian brand. I highly recommend that you try one of these. They are the Humvees of tea brewing. Then I shook several handfuls of an herbal blend, Hibiscus Queen, actually have it right here, that I had purchased at the retreat. The tea maker, Miriam Noval, a jovial blonde lady, had set up an operation outside the daily, also not a sponsor, just love the tea, outside the daily Qigong class at the retreat, and she had offered steaming samples in paper cups. I could not resist. I must have been prescient in buying a quarter pound of her tea, because the herbs in Ms. Noval's tea salon's Hibiscus Queen were exactly what I needed to start my recovery. And again, none of the products or substances mentioned in this article is a sponsor. There are no conflicts. The package contained hibiscus, rosebuds, black currant, and pomegranate. I'm going to try to see if I can hold this up to the camera so you can see how pretty it is. I hope you can see that. I added to the teapot a few sticks of curly, woody mauby bark and some teaspoons full of ascorbic acid, vitamin C, powdery and tart. And I'm going to show you, because it's like show and tell in kindergarten. There is mauby bark. I hope you can see it. It's difficult for me to see the screen and the text at the same time, so I just hope that I'm holding that up in the right place. But this is kind of a curly Caribbean tree bark, and it looks like bark, but it's got unbelievable healing powers. And I'm going to show you the ascorbic acid. So this is, budget is a thing. This is a quarter, how much is this? A pound of ascorbic acid, vitamin C. And it's pretty affordable. It lasts forever. So where did I get this? Pure Original Ingredients is where I got it from. And it's a dietary supplement. It's vitamin C. powdery and tart. Why did I reach for these herbs and barks out of my whole pantry? I'm not an herbalist, but I know herbalists will concur with this. The actual herbs, the right herbs, actually seem to call to you silently or to magnetize you and attract you, depending on the condition you are trying to heal. Your hand just reaches to where it should go. Isn't that true, herbalists? Let me know if you've had this experience in the comments. I added local honey to the brew and began sipping. Immediately, 3 hot, sweet sips in, I felt an herbal army taking up its instinctive counterattack against the viral infection in my lungs. For what herbs had I instinctively and with some fuzzy memory of their properties reached? Hibiscus. I'm going to hold this up again just because it's so beautiful. I hope you can see that lovely color. And you can see rosebuds floating there. So pretty. Hibiscus actually lowers the titers, concentrations of avian flu. It also inhibits the replication of the avian flu virus. According to the article, quote, high antiviral effects of hibiscus tea extract on the H5 subtypes of low and highly pathogenic avian influenza viruses, 2016, in the Journal of Veterinary Medical Science, quote, and now this is going to be a paragraph from a scientific article, but you can handle it. I'll explain it as we go. Quote, we screened the antiviral effects of 11 herbal tea extracts: hibiscus, black tea, sencha, rosehip tea, burdock tea, green tea, jasmine tea, ginger tea, lavender tea, rose tea, and oak tea against the H5N1 HPA4 in vitro, meaning in glass, in a laboratory setting. Among the tested extracts, only the hibiscus extract and its fractionated extract, and the term for that, the contraction is FR hibis, highly, and I italicize this, highly and rapidly reduced the titers, the concentrations of all H5, HPA4s, and low pathogenic AIVs, LPAIVs used in the pretreatment tests of Madden-Darby canine kidney cells that were, in other words, mammal cells like yours, that were inoculated with a mixture of the virus and the extract. So you've got to understand, highly and rapidly reduce the concentrations when they put the extract of hibiscus into a mammal cell, and that was inoculated with a virus and with the hibiscus extract. You get what happened there. Immunogold electron microscopy showed that, and I italicize this, anti-H5 monoclonal antibodies could not bind to the deformed H5 virus particles pre-treated with the hibiscus extract. In post-treatment tests of MDCK, meaning the canine kidney cells cultured in the presence of the hibiscus extract after infection with H5N1 HPA4, the avian flu, the hibiscus extract inhibited viral replication, I'm italicizing this, and the expression of viral antigens and genes. Among the plants tested, hibiscus showed the most prominent antiviral effects against both H5, HPA4, and LPA4, end quote. Okay, so you got it. Basically, this stuff killed or suppressed the concentration of active flu virus load in a mammalian cell in a lab context. The peer-reviewed articles in PubMed that show that hibiscus is antiviral, antimicrobial, antibacterial, and immune boosting are so abundant that they can't be easily summarized. Many cultures seem to know the powerhouse properties of hibiscus in fighting colds and flu, except for our own allopathic, meaning kind of conventional Western medical tradition. In Chinese medicine, hibiscus is used to fight colds and flu, and Chinese researchers found that hibiscus eases lung edema, swollen tissues in the lungs, exactly what I was suffering from, and that it cut the number of mouse deaths in half. They published their results in 2023 in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. These are peer-reviewed scientific journals. Quote, anti-influenza properties of teliricide isolated from Hibiscus mutabilis L is the title of this article. Results. Quote, using bioassay guided isolation, the flavonoid teliroside from hibiscus was obtained, which inhibited 4 AIV strains in, again, mammalian cells with EC50 ranging from 3.87 to 27.61 by suppressing the viral ribonucleoprotein activity. You get what is happening here. The hibiscus extract in the same dog kidney cell, basically, mammalian kidney cell, as before in another experiment, suppresses the protein in the virus structure, essentially, that is instrumental to viral replication. Teliroside also significantly downregulated the expression of cytokines, chemokines, in A549 cells and protected 50% of PR8 infected BALBC mice from death, and at 800 milligrams per kilogram a day, improved lung edema conditions. So 50% of the mice didn't die in the experimental group as opposed to the control group. It lowered deaths by half. You've got to remember when I'm reading this, that the terrifying activity in your body that led to death from COVID, which is a coronavirus, right? Just a cold or flu virus. Not just, obviously, it was artificially enhanced, but that's the category of things that it is. It was a cytokine storm. And so they knew since 2023 that hibiscus suppresses cytokine storms and saves lungs from being swollen. And you remember that it was people dying of, remember the ground glass condition in the lungs? Damage to the lungs was what was leading to people being intubated from COVID and dying of the intubation and the ventilators. It was their lungs not functioning from swelling. So they knew since 2023 that this very affordable tea or plant, hibiscus, saved half of the mice from death from cytokine and lung inflammation. Conclusion: cytokine storms and lung inflammation. Teliroside is effective for influenza virus infection treatment and promising for further drug development. This study is the first to demonstrate that teliroside in FRY acts against influenza virus. It's a cure for the flu. They say there's no cure for the flu. They found the cure in 2023. I could go on and on, citing the peer-reviewed studies showing the powers of hibiscus to save lungs from dangerous edema and to save mice from death from the flu. Let's look at pomegranate, another ingredient in my $14 quarter pound of hibiscus queen tea. $14. Peer-reviewed research showing that pomegranate immediately weakens both bacteria and viruses, including flu viruses and other serious viruses affecting health, is abundant. Quote, the pomegranate effects on bacteria and viruses that influence human health, end quote, was published in Evidence-Based Complementary Alternative Medicine 2013. I do want you to notice that a lot of these groundbreaking peer-reviewed studies showing incredible effectiveness for natural and herbal and alternative medicines treatments are from some time ago. It looks like studies like that are no longer funded or published as often. The paragraphs showing the results of pomegranate on flu are so dramatic that I reproduce them here. And again, you can handle this. Quote, pomegranate extracts have also shown antiviral effects against influenza virus, HIV-1, and pox viruses. I'm going to read that again. HIV-1 and pox viruses. Influenza virus continues to be a major cause of morbidity and mortality, sickness and death each year, with 31,000 deaths reported yearly in the US, despite access to vaccines. However, frequent recombination events and viral evolution, meaning the virus changes all the time, necessitate the change in vaccine composition, requiring administration of new vaccines yearly. That's the business model they, want. However, researchers have shown that pomegranate polyphenols were virucidal. They killed the virus against influenza A virus. That's what we have now, influenza A. Suppressed the replication of virus in host cells and inhibited agglutination of chicken red blood cells caused by the virus using real-time polymerase chain reaction. A plaque assay and a median tissue culture infective dose 50% hemagglutination assay. They also showed that among 4 polyphenols, and they list them, punicalagin was found to be the most effective anti-influenza component. And then I italicize this, blocking replication of influenza virus RNA and inhibiting agglutination of chicken red blood cells by the virus. So you understand that both of these are really important. The ingredients in pomegranate keep the flu virus from replicating, and they also keep blood from getting sticky, red blood cells from getting sticky, as shown in chicken red blood cells. Sundararajan et al. Also showed that the acidity of pomegranate juice and concentrated liquid pomegranate extract solutions contributed, I italicize this, to rapid anti-influenza activity. A 5-minute treatment at room temperature with 800 milliliters pp was shown to result in at least a 3-log titer reduction of influenza viruses, PR8, H1N1, X31, H3N2, and a reassortant H5N1 virus derived from a human isolate. So these aren't just kind of hypotheticals. They're using viruses isolated from sick human beings. Loss of hemagglutinating activity, so the blood is not condensing or sticking together, was reported to accompany the loss of influenza infectivity with decreased antibody binding to viral surface molecules after treatment with PP, with pomegranate. Viral structural damage was also reported using electron microscopic analysis of PP-treated viral particles. So the pomegranate is damaging the structure of the flu virus, just, knocking it out. Coatwall suggested that pomegranate juice can neutralize the infectivity of diverse enveloped viruses and a number of subtypes of a given enveloped virus, indicating potential for development as a treatment option that can be broadly effective, and I italicize this, against pandemic viruses like HIV, potentially pandemic viruses like influenza, and some carcinogenic viruses, cancer-causing viruses. It was shown that influenza A, HK, X31, that's H3N2, influenza A Vietnam, H5N1, and a reassortant X31, these are different kinds of flu viruses, containing the NS gene segment of an H5N1 isolate, were inactivated when treated for 5 minutes at 37 degrees Celsius with pomegranate juice. Pomegranate juice did all this, you guys. I hope you understand from this that pomegranate literally disables various influenza viruses or makes them less infectious and less damaging within minutes. Now, let's look at black currant, which has long been used in traditional home remedies for colds and flu, and to boost the immune system generally in the West. In the UK, a mass-produced black currant cordial called Ribena has been beloved for decades. The article, quote, antiviral activity of Ladania 067, an extract from wild black currant leaves against influenza A virus in vitro and in vivo, meaning in the lab, in glass, and in life, in living mammals, in Frontiers in Microbiology 2014, shows extraordinary results from early treatment of flu with black currant. Quote, influenza, a respiratory disease caused by influenza viruses, still represents a major threat to humans and several animal species. Besides vaccination, only 2 classes of drugs are available for antiviral treatment against this pathogen. Thus, there is a strong need for new effective antivirals against influenza viruses. Here, we tested Ladania 067, an extract from the leaves of the wild black currant, for potential antiviral activity against influenza A virus, flu A, that's what we've got, in vitro and in vivo. And then I italicize this because it's so mind-blowing. Ladania 067, the black currant leaf extract, was highly effective. EC50 value 49.3, plus or minus 1.1 ng/ml, against the human pandemic influenza virus strain A, Regensburg D609, in other words, H1N1. The extract exhibited an antiviral effect when the virus was pre-incubated prior to infection or when added directly after infection. No antiviral effect was found when infected cells were treated 2, 4, or 8 hours after infection, meaning that you have to take this at as soon as you feel sick, basically, at a very early step in the virus infection cycle. Again, italicizing. In the mouse infection model, we were able to demonstrate that an intranasal, in your nose, application of 500 units of Ladania 067, I don't know how to interpret that symbol, so I'm going to post it, and the scientists among you can tell me what it means. But tiny mice, tiny nasal passages got to be a tiny amount, inhibits progeny virus titers, in other words, concentrations of the virus, the flu virus that can replicate itself in the lung, up to 85% after 24 hours. Italics mine. We conclude, they say, that the extract from the leaves of the wild black currant may be a promising source for the identification of new molecules with antiviral functions against influenza virus. Or they could just use black currant, right? They don't have to go through the, laborious pharmaceutical process of turning it into something that can be patented, because it is, you just buy some black currants. You understand from the above that black currant leaves were, quote, highly effective against the human pandemic flu strain H1N1, and that when mice received black currant leaf extract in their nasal passages, the virus titers, or the concentration in their bodies, was inhibited by 85% within a day. You guys, oh my God, I can't stand it. And the Caribbean mauby bark, one of my favorites, which I showed you. I'll hold it up again. Mauby bark. Quote, an assessment of total polyphenolic content and antioxidant potential of mauby bark extracts brewed for different lengths of time in Journal of Food Research 2019 showed that mauby bark has antioxidant effects and scavenges free radicals. This activity boosts your immune system and protects your cells, thus helping you fight off viral infections or heal from a cold or influenza. The ascorbic acid, or vitamin C, that I added to the whole concoction. This will blow your mind, you guys. By the way, it's more effective cold than hot, people have written to remind me. Very true. The abstract of, quote, the effectiveness of vitamin C in preventing and relieving the symptoms of virus-induced respiratory infections. And when I'm reading this, think about how many children are on inhalers, are on steroids for asthma. I mean, over-vaccination causes asthma and allergies, and then they have to be on these damaging, mood-altering substances their whole lives, but they could just take vitamin C. Published in 1999 in the Journal of Manipulative and Physiological Therapeutics, is so astonishing, I present it here. Quote, background, an ever-increasing demand to evaluate the effect of dietary supplements on specific health conditions by use of a, quote, significant scientific, end quote, standard has prompted the publication of this study. Objective, to study the effect of megadose vitamin C in preventing and relieving cold and flu symptoms in a test group compared with a control group, which, by the way, is the gold standard of a scientific study. Design, prospective controlled study of students in a technical training facility. Subjects, a total of 463 students made up the control, total of 252 made up the experimental or test group. Method, they tracked the reports of cold and flu symptoms in the test population compared with reports of flu symptoms in the control population. Those in the control were treated with pain relievers and decongestants, just like Big Pharma advises, whereas those in the test population reporting symptoms were treated with hourly doses of 1,000 mgs of vitamin C for the first, is that milligrams? for the first 6 hours and then 3 times daily thereafter. Those not reporting symptoms in the test group were also administered 1,000 milligram doses 3 times daily. Results overall, I italicize this, reported flu and cold symptoms in the test group decreased 85%, compared with the control group after the administration of megadose vitamin C. Conclusion, in italics, vitamin C in megadoses administered before or after the appearance of cold and flu symptoms relieved and prevented the symptoms in the test population compared with the control group. That study is from 2019. All right, that study is from 2019. I'm going back to the study. It is, oh no, I'm sorry, it's much older than that, 1999. It's 27 years old, this study. And for 27 years, you probably haven't heard about this study because the makers of asthma medication, of cold and flu medication, certainly hospitals that treat bronchitis and pneumonia when colds and flu get worse and worse and worse, don't want you to know the dramatic improvement in cold and flu symptoms by 85% in the test group in a big peer-reviewed study. I will never forget, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. How is this information not on the cover of every legacy news outlet every winter? The next day, feeling weak but better, I used, maybe TMI, a Neilmed nasal lavage device called the Sinugator, which is perhaps the most regrettable name in marketing history. But the product itself is also rather endearing, as Dr. Ketan Mehta's smiling face appears encouragingly on every package. Put this in your nostril, Dr. Mehta seems in a friendly way to be urging. This device is an adaptation for Western consumers of the Ayurvedic practice of nasal rinsing to avoid or mitigate viral infections. And again, you can get this anywhere, Amazon, over the counter. It's very easy to find. I will never forget Dr. Peter McCullough explaining that the population's nasal rinsing upon returning home from being in public places led to Pakistan effectively managing the COVID pandemic successfully. I also continually tell friends and family about Dr. McCullough's recommendations that COVID be treated by nasal rinsing with a 10% dilution of betadine, which has been in use for decades. It's an antiseptic, in distilled water 4 times a day. Everyone I know, including myself, who used this protocol, got over COVID in 24 to 48 hours with no lasting ill effects. So mindful that by the same premise, I need to kill the viral infection in my nasal passages, I needed to kill it before it could do further damage in my lungs, I rinsed as the genial Dr. Mehta advised. That night, I slept a healing sleep. By the next day, the color was back in my cheeks and the infection had cleared my lungs. I added chicken soup, Jewish penicillin, quote unquote, with many cloves of garlic in the broth, and I added fresh slices of ginger, also an antiviral, to the teas of that day. And I link a recipe for Jewish chicken soup. Yes, PubMed has multiple peer-reviewed studies showing that Jewish chicken soup has measurable benefits when it comes to healing upper respiratory infections. In, quote, Chicken soup inhibits neutrophil chemotaxis in vitro, 2000, in the peer-reviewed journal Chest, the authors found that indeed your mom's or dad's homemade soup is more healing than Campbell's and that you should drink the broth. Quote, chicken soup has long been regarded as a remedy for symptomatic upper respiratory tract infections, as it is likely that the clinical similarity of the diverse infectious processes that can result in colds is due to a shared inflammatory response. An effect of chicken soup in mitigating inflammation could account for its attested benefits. That's their hypothesis. It's sensible. To evaluate this, a traditional chicken soup was tested for its ability to inhibit neutrophil migration, which I gather is part of inflammation, using the standard Boyden-Blindwell chemotaxis chamber assay with zymosan activated serum and FMET LEU PHE as chemoattractants. I italicize this. Chicken soup significantly inhibited neutrophil migration and did so in a concentration-dependent manner, meaning the more you take of the chicken soup, the more inhibition of inflammatory processes you're going to experience with a cold. The activity was present in a non-particulate component, meaning broth, of the chicken soup. All of the vegetables present in the soup and the chicken individually had inhibitory activity, although only the chicken lacked cytotoxic activity. Interestingly, the complete soup also lacked cytotoxic activity. In other words, drink your broth. Commercial soups varied greatly in their inhibitory activity. In other words, make it from scratch. The present study, therefore, suggests that chicken soup may contain a number of substances with beneficial medicinal activity. A mild anti-inflammatory effect could be one mechanism by which the soup could result in the mitigation of symptomatic upper respiratory tract infections, period, end quote. So it's true. Chicken soup actually is medicinal. It's actually, big S science medicinal. So I took all these well-known traditional remedies. By day 4, I was fine. I was fully healed. Why do I share all of this? Well, first of all, when I summarized my healing protocols on X, the post got 1 million views. So I conclude that a lot of people have been suffering with, quote, flu A, as it has been profitably branded. But second of all, I'm appalled and horrified that traditional substances, all proven to be as powerful as the ones I itemized above in killing or mitigating the potency of flu viruses, are not presented to suffering patients by doctors or described as effective healing modalities in legacy media. People are told that there is either nothing to be done or that they must rely solely on, quote, flu vaccines and cold and flu drugs. When they get bad enough, they must rely on hospitals, which have their own dangers. The abstracts about these herbs, barks, and powders that show that they clear or ease flu symptoms dramatically in very short periods of time should be front page news every flu season. But instead, these well-known traditional remedies are consigned to obscure databases. And as you can see from the dates of these articles, additional research on such dramatically healing substances has in recent years been slowed or stalled. Pharma companies, including Moderna, are complaining, including at Davos, Switzerland, that uptake of the flu vaccine in the US has softened. So they are boosting their efforts to push the flu vaccines around the world. What puts Americans and everyone at risk is not the absence of a flu vaccine. It is the fact that the position of the allopathic medical establishment is that apart from a vaccine, there, quote, is no treatment for the common cold or flu, end quote, except for rest in liquids or their own dangerous products, says Big Pharma and Big Medicine. Why do Big Medicine and Big Pharma tell these outright lies? The global flu vaccine market was $7.97 billion in 2023. And cold and flu drugs via Big Pharma? Quote, the cold and flu drugs market size was valued at US $17.47 billion in 2024. And the total global cold and flu drugs revenue is expected to grow at a rate of 10.86% from 2025 to 2032, reaching nearly almost 40 billion by 2032. 40 billion globally in cold and flu drugs. Why are cold and flu drugs market size expected to double in 8 years? What awful, perhaps even unnatural, cold and flu seasons might the pharma industry be anticipating in years to come that we cannot fathom? The bottom line is that this situation, in which cheap, millennia-old, tried and tested cures and treatments for cold and flu, from hibiscus to pomegranate to nasal lavage to ginger and garlic, are silenced and censored and sent to the attic of medical history, while people suffer and even die every year from treatable viral infections. It is a criminal situation. Yes, another criminal situation. Influenza, as you read, kills from 17,000 to 31,000 Americans a year. Except in the launch years of the COVID pandemic, when a new category, PIC, or pneumonia, influenza, and COVID, was invented, thus shifting tens of thousands of annual flu deaths into the new politically useful category that included COVID. When I looked online, many people had been hit with this horrific flu. I heard from friends that local clinics were jammed with sufferers. Should these hundreds of thousands suffer? Should these tens of thousands die? I say no. Go save yourselves. Seriously, please go learn about how to treat and heal yourself and your loved ones early so that bad colds and flus don't eventually become lethal bronchitis or pneumonia. Our grandmothers and great grandmothers did this routinely. They brought traditional remedies to the sick room where loved ones suffered from a chill or from catarrh. Only in this advanced era are we told that nothing much can be done for our viral infections. That is, we are told that there is nothing much to be done that we can do ourselves. My friends, you have nothing to lose but your Kleenex tissues. Save yourselves from Stéphane Bancel and Albert Bourla. They do not wish you well. Heal yourselves. The natural world is a garden. It is also a playground, and it is also a medicine chest. So that is my, oh, lots of people have tuned in. That is my Substack about how to heal yourself from colds and flu, especially flu A, which you saw was the flu that was tested in some of these studies. I'm just going to take your questions, and I'm not being rude. I'm just looking up something on my phone so that I can thank our sponsors as well, because without our sponsors, I couldn't bring you information like this, which I think you will find informative. I mean, if 1 million people shared my post, it means 1 million people have loved ones or are themselves suffering from cold and flu. Let's see what's going on here. Aryeh Naftali says, we shall overcome. Good people around the world, and especially in Israel and the USA, are waking up to the truth. I will jump in there and say good people everywhere. There are good people everywhere. And I can't wait till we get to commune again, whether it's Israel or Lebanon or Iran or Iraq or Armenia or France or Belgium or Colombia. It's time for the good people of the world to join forces and save one another. They have a lot in common. Let's see. Howard Turner, is this real? Says there are no remedies for viri, meaning viruses. Once you have them, merely vaccination you have in the fall to help you fight them better. I would like to know what evidence you have for that. I mean, I just shared with you my lived experience of having active viri in my body and killing them, treating them after I had already been infected. So I don't agree with you, obviously, and I don't think the studies that I read show that. Also fun in a mocktail. Ooh, hi Babette, our good friend. Yes, and in fact, there are wonderful websites that have recipes for hibiscus mocktails and cocktails if you're going that route once you've recovered from your cold or flu. It's a legendary drink in the Caribbean, especially Jamaica. And they're wonderful cooling mocktails for summertime drinking, and even delicious hot versions, which I actually made on video once for winter. And you can also add rum. There, I said it, if you want to. Let's see. Now for the technical, that is part of the reason for the seasons of the year. Well, that's very abstract, but I'm going to go back to here where you said there's the great mythological resonances of the pomegranate, seemingly contra death itself. Indeed, pomegranate seeds, as I recall, were talking about the Greek myths. We're talking about Persephone. Is that right, Babette? When she ate a few seeds of pomegranate, she was able to escape her forced abduction to Hades at least half the year. And that myth is the explanation for the seasons that we have, the changing of the seasons. Will we be able to hear this again? Yes, you will. Thanks for the info, says Donna Gratson. You will, and here's how you will hear it again. It will be posted on my Substack Outspoken. It will also be posted on, and it'll be kept there in the archives. It'll also be on Daily Clout, our news site, dailyclout.io, and we will always keep it there. Of course, it'll be posted for free. There's no paywall on either of those sites. But if you want to support us, please become a subscriber or make a donation, a one-time donation. And I know that you can always have access to the archive as a subscriber, but if you don't want to subscribe or can't afford to, just download it or bookmark it and download it. I think you can do that. Okay. Does go back, says Babette, vitamin C, St. Georgi, and Pauling. Yeah, I remember when Linus Pauling was well known for his discoveries with vitamin C, but that it's like the culture has erased what was once very common knowledge about the healing powers of vitamin C. I mean, obviously, people who closely follow alternative medicine never forgot, but the culture itself, like Red Book, did stories on, the discoveries Linus Pauling was making with vitamin C. It was very mainstream in the 70s and I believe into the 80s, as I recall. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting. Yoel Avraham says, please reduce exposure to EMF radio frequency, which may suppress proper immune function for sure. And now I'll share with you another thing. Let me just grab it if I can. This cost was expensive to do the whole house, but less expensive than having your immune system damaged. I love this guy. And again, not a sponsor. This is my EMF guy. Protect the ones you love. This is sitting on top of my Wi-Fi router. There are versions of whatever they did stuck to my computer, stuck to my phone, and I have felt much better since they remediated the electromagnetic fields that were bothering me a great deal here in the country. I really believe in, well, there's so much evidence that electromagnetic radiation damages you, and I agree with Yoel Avraham. There is a lot of evidence that whatever we catch, we get sicker from basically EMF exposure sickness and damage to our immune systems. That is 1,000% correct. There's tons of documentation of this on Children's Health Defense has a lot of documentation of this. And there's an EMF awareness nonprofit whose name escapes me at the moment, but easy to find. And I encourage you to educate yourselves about that. And definitely call my EMF guy and say Naomi sent you. They've made such a difference in my life. But you kind of want to bring them wherever you go because but I wear a watch. I mean, it looks like a watch. It's actually EMF. It's an EMF barrier that I can wear when I travel. I'm a big believer. I don't get how it works, but I'm a big believer. All right. Okay. So the question is, have you spoken yet about Minnesota? My NYU daughter has gone down to Union Square for a protest. That's coming up next. I promise I will shortly. Thank you so much, says Carolyn Carson. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Elizabeth Haggerty Seston says, thank you, Dr. Wolf. God bless you and watch over you. Always, thank you. Listening to Naomi on a chilly and snowy Saturday afternoon is so soothing while doing the dishes, laundry, and housekeeping. Well, I appreciate that because I've been doing my own dishes, laundry, and housekeeping today. And it makes me very happy to know that you are listening and that it helps and that you feel supported and connected, because that is my goal. And you support and connect with me. You make me feel supported and connected with in turn. Thank you, Harper Quinn, for your kind words. Well, you guys, that was well received. I appreciate it. So remember, like tea is a serious thing. Steeping herbs is a serious thing. Those little tea bags don't do it. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but there's no easy way. You have to steep this stuff. You have to steep it for 10 or 15 minutes. I do really urge you to get a groche if you can. They're a little tricky to use, but it makes a big difference because you're not getting the full benefit of herbs if you just get, a Celestial Seasonings tea bag and dunk it in there. It's like you have to extract the goodness. And please be well. Okay. Now we're going to just take a moment to thank American Alternative Assets. And then I'll go into the next hour and I will talk about first Minnesota, because I've got an anxious mom waiting to hear more, and also President Trump at Davos. So What do three billionaires, four major banks, and a legendary 72-year-old investor all have in common? They're all making the same shocking prediction. Gold is headed for $10,000 an ounce or more. Goldman Sachs says gold will surge 20%. JP Morgan says 25%. And one respected economist now believes the US government could deliberately raise gold's official price to help pay off the national debt. And the world's wealthiest players are already making their moves. Now you can see exactly what they're seeing for free. Our friends at American Alternative Assets just released a powerful new report. This is the surprising case for $10,000 gold. It breaks down the hidden signals, the central bank gold buying spree, and the way that smart Americans are protecting their retirement with gold right now. And, I always jump in here and interrupt myself and say, Brian and I often note that we first started talking about buying gold 5 years ago when we first became aware that you really could, in a kind of commercial way. And if we had done so instead of just thinking about it, then we would have nearly quintupled our investment. It has gone up nearly 5x in 5 years. Go to cloutgold.com to download this report for free or call 855-803-GOLD. That's 855-803-GOLD or cloutgold.com. And don't wait the window to act before it's out of range again, is closing fast.